Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church, to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome back to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is Jason Broughton. Today we have back with us Dave Peterson. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you.
We are looking at the Gospel reading for the fourth Sunday in Lent, Laetare. It comes from John chapter 6, verses 1 to 15. I'll read that in the New King James. After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. Then a great multitude followed him, because they saw his signs which he performed on those who were diseased. And Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. Now the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was near. Then Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?" But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish, but what are they among so many?" Then Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, in number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those sitting down, and likewise of the fish as much as they wanted. So when they were filled, he said to his disciples, "Gather up the fragments that remain, so that nothing is lost." Therefore they gathered them up, and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves which were left over by those who had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, said, "This is truly the prophet who has come into the world." Therefore, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he departed again to the mountain by himself alone. Okay, so Laetare. We often think of this Sunday as a reprieve, sort of like a pause in Lent's severity, a softening of the discipline, a chance to perhaps catch our breath before the push of Passion Tide and Holy Week leading us to the empty tomb. And we see this in the change in the vestments, right? The deep violet gives way to rose. The visual austerity seems to ease a bit. And then you can hear it in what's read. The scriptures, the hymns, they all speak of joy, thanksgiving, abundance. But it seems to me that it's not a reprieve from discipline or a reprieve from Lent, but rather an explanation of what all of these disciplines and this austerity is. It tells us, in a sense, it tells us why the season exists at all. That there is still joy in repentance, that there is still joy in discipline. There is joy in being brought to the end of ourselves so that Christ may be our true life. So Lent isn't, and I think sometimes we think of it this way, that Lent is a season of despair, but instead it seems like it is a season of rightly ordered hunger. Right, so that the hunger, when it's rightly directed, is not a curse, but a gift to us. And because hunger prepares us to receive what God alone can give, we go through this season with these kinds of disciplines so that this hunger might be rightly ordered again to the one thing needful. And so there is a reprieve there, but it's more of a reminder of the joy that is in Lent.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think I've used that language of reprieve, I think, pretty regularly. But I like what you say, and I think you're on to something. Certainly, we don't want the idea that there's ever a season of despair in the church. So we definitely want to rally against that. I find in a lot of the liturgical material, the word for Laetare, the word refreshment. Sometimes it's been called the Sunday of refreshment. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that maybe kind of helps with what you're saying, that there is a kind of, lightening of things and this focus on joy, but it's not so much about stopping the good that's being done as it is recognizing that good is being done, through these disciplines, right? Through this reordering or reorienting of the passions. So, and I think that does fit, in an interesting way with the feeding of the 5,000. Mm-hmm. That it is in the wilderness, and pointedly, not in Jerusalem. So in the shadow of the Passover and of the temple, and of course, of the looming cross and Good Friday. But there is this also, as you say, this abundance and this joy and this, rest or refreshment, not reprieve, because the journey is still, right? I mean, reprieve
the journey
is
endless for us in this life.
Yeah.
Not endless.
Right.
But it's ongoing.
Yeah, this isn't, in the thick of the Vietnam War, being sent to Hawaii for 2 weeks of R&R. This is stopping in a stronghold where someone else is pulling guard duty for a few hours so you can eat. Mm-hmm. But you're that's a temporary. You're moving on, and that's what this is, right?
And I wonder too,
Mid-journey.
Yeah, and I wonder too. This text is perfect for this Sunday in that regard. I'm wondering if, Jesus anticipates their hunger before they ask for anything. And this is something Luther goes on about, right?
Right.
That before they even request, he is planning.
Right.
But I wonder if what's left unstated there is he already feels the pangs of hunger, so he knows where they're at as well. I mean, so it's not just a divine omniscience, but he's feeling the hunger pangs as well. He's been through the 40 days, so he knows where his sustenance lies, and in his mercy and his care for them, he wants to give them enough to refresh them, not to give in, right? And to receive and to see where their true satisfaction comes.
Right. Well, he's the one that provided the manna in the 40 years.
Yeah.
Right. That he himself was denied in the 40 days, but the whole purpose was to feed the world. And then of course ultimately to feed the world on himself. Mm-hmm. So, in fact,
that's what you get, which follows, right, in John chapter 6.
Yeah. So here's some facts, sort of isagogical stuff about the feeding of the 5,000 that I think's fun. First of all, I'm sure we've said this before, but it's the only miracle that is recorded in all 4 Gospels. Mm-hmm. So it has a significance there. John is, of course, the weird one of the 3, or of the 4. So he has different vocabulary and then also unique details. Particularly, he has a boy with 5 loaves and the fish. And then he has Philip and Andrew, those 2 exchanges, which are really educational. And then
he has different bread, too, doesn't he?
Different, yeah, he's I don't know if it's different, but he says it's barley, right? And then finally, I think really significantly, is this Christological discourse that immediately follows. So it's that no other miracle in the Gospels gets a long explanation, the way that John provides this long explanation, this Christological explanation that Christ is the bread from heaven, right? Mm-hmm. So so let me just go on a little bit longer here on this. So all 4 of the accounts have this in common. It's a remote, it's in the desert. It's a large crowd. There's the recognition of a need the lack of food. And then there's some sort of small thing that's begun that's multiplied, right? Mm-hmm. Then you have Jesus giving thanks and breaking the bread, right? Distributing it to them. And then everyone eating as much as he wants. And then collecting the fragments and gathering it into 12 baskets. And then all 4 accounts say that there were 5,000 men. So those are that's kind of the basis of it. And then I think we can take from here, depending on how you count, 4 or 5 sort of theological undertones. First of all, even though it drives some people crazy, and Luther doesn't notice it at all, but there's definitely a Eucharistic application here. And I think you have to almost be willful to miss, right? Yes. And, the taking, the giving thanks, the breaking, the giving, right, mirrors the institution, of course, in the upper room. And then, just historically, from the very beginning, all of the patristic literature, they see this as a foreshadowing of the giving of the risen body and blood of Jesus in the sacrament of the altar. Mm-hmm. Kind of going along with that, this language of refreshment Sunday, I picked this up from the Fred Lindemann's book, The Post-Communion Collect. We give thanks to thee, Almighty God, that thou hast refreshed us through this salutary gift. That could be a nice homiletical tie. So
I don't use that collect during Lent.
I don't either, but I was kind of thinking about. We use this Cranmer collect just to make everybody stumble. That I love the inestimable benefit.
Oh, that is.
It's a great word. So
but do you ever? I change words if I can't say them.
The problem is there's no other word. We would have to say, the benefit which we can't even estimate or imagine.
Surely there is a synonym for. I can't even say it. Inestimable.
Inestimable. Anyway, I like it because it's both the forgiveness of sins and also the example of a godly life. So we want to
incalculable. I can't even say that. Innumerable, unfathomable.
Unfathomable would be unfathomable. All right. Anyway, going on. That's the
limitless.
Limitless. Well, that doesn't mean the same thing. All right. So the next one is really the kind of Moses and Exodus reality, right? Because it's happening in the desert, but also the tide of the manna, right? And then, in John's gospel, right, this is truly the prophet who is to come into the world. And so it's got to be a reference to the Deuteronomy prophecy, the prophet like Moses, right? He's leading them out. And I think here, I never thought of this before, but I wonder if this is important, in fact, that this doesn't happen in Jerusalem, and if this is actually, in some ways, an exodus into the rest of the world and the mission to the Gentiles. I know that's feeding of the 4,000 a little bit, but because where is he leading them away from?
Passover.
He's leading them away from. So anyway,
it's like he's fulfilling the Passover that is required for. This is the only time that Jesus isn't stated as going to Jerusalem for one of the major feasts. There's one other time in John where he's not going to go, but then he goes.
That's right.
This is the only time where the Passover is stated that it's at the time of the Passover, and he's not heading to Jerusalem.
Yeah, he's instituting a new Passover at the Eucharist. And
there are some who think that this is actually the time of the second Passover spoken of in the book of Numbers for those who were defiled by dead bodies and couldn't attend or something like that. That's possible. And it makes sense, their accounting of those things. But I think in the end, he's instituting that he's the new Passover, and he's leading them into the wilderness with this. Like he's fulfilling all these things. They're to follow him as the pillar of cloud and fire, as the light of the world. Right.
And he's instituting an entirely new priesthood. I mean, all of the things, right? All of the Levitical codes that are given through Moses are being replaced in a sense, or if you don't like that, being, expanded into something new.
I think that's all fascinating. But thinking about how to preach that is really difficult for me to wrap my head around, like all those fulfillments.
Well, I mean, you could just list them. I mean, this is truly the prophet who is to come into the world. That's the text, and just say, look, that means Moses, and here's the things Moses did, and here's what Christ is doing. I think I could preach pretty well.
Well, I mean, what's the application?
Well, that's tougher. I guess the application is believe these things for what they are, and realize that, Christ is feeding us in the wilderness and doing all these things to and for us now. Yeah, I don't know what other application it'd really have.
I mean, it sounds like a great Bible study, and obviously we should do this teaching, but it seems like one of those deals where it's like, oh, pastor's going off on this, great insight, but it has no bearing on me other than it's kind of cool. You know what I'm saying?
I do, but I do think every sermon should have application. I don't think every sermon has to have as much application as the others. So, I think there's a place and a time to do this sort of thing. And the application is, maybe the application here is be refreshed, and don't, maybe you don't have to take home a to-do list. You can sort of bask in the things that God gives and develop a greater appreciation for them. That's a legit application, and I think edifying.
Yeah. I do like, speaking of refreshment, like even in the wilderness, there's grass.
Yeah.
And then Luther's point about receiving all these good gifts, but then not letting them be wasted.
Yeah.
I thought that was an impressive insight.
I agree. Yeah, let me pull it here. That's the very last paragraph.
Before the analogy, right?
I thought it was the one you were talking about. Well, maybe he repeats it.
Oh, maybe he does.
Oh, yeah, he does kind of repeat it. So before the analogy, he says, right, be diligent about picking up fragments, teaching us to be prudent in retaining and using his good gifts so that we do not tempt God. Just as he wants us to believe when we have nothing and to be certain that he will give it, so he does not want us to be tempted to have his good gifts be despised or left lying to spoil while we wait for other gifts from heaven through miracles. But then, so I didn't realize there was a parallelism in this, because in his final paragraph, what I thought you were talking about was, you see in this gospel that Christ, though he had the highest regard for evangelical poverty and was not anxious about tomorrow, as he teaches, nevertheless had in reserve 200 denarii, 5 loaves and 2 fish. By the way, I thought that was hilarious. I never thought they had 200 denarii.
I know. I always considered like that's way too much, but it makes sense. Like it was like, we've got 200, not even what we have will feed all these people.
I always just thought it was just sort of like, he's like, look, even if we had 200, which we don't, it won't be enough. But Luther takes it as, he was saying, if we spent every single cent we have, it wouldn't be enough. I think Luther's probably right. Anyway,
that makes more sense in the context.
It does. It does. We are to learn from this that such poverty and freedom from anxiety does not consist in having nothing, as the sect of the barefoot friars and monks assert, and yet do not themselves keep. Rather, it consists in a free heart and a poor spirit. Abraham and Isaac had great possessions, yet they lived without anxiety and in poverty as the best of Christians. So Luther does take that. It is a strange tact in both those paragraphs where he's sort of talking about the material blessings that God gives us aren't to be despised or wasted, but also not worshipped.
Yes.
And he does sort of warn against, some sort of asceticism that would deny ourselves to try to impress God.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that in paragraph 4, that last sentence. Rather, whatever is there, we should receive and use, and whatever is not there, we should believe and wait for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. It's exactly right.
It's exactly.
Easier to say than do, but
This is actually a pretty short sermon, I thought.
Oh,
for
it's
him.
crazy. It's the shortest one, I think, in the whole I've ever seen in this volume. Yeah.
You think the transcriber just kind of nodded off?
I think maybe Luther,
It's like, here he goes on the papacy again. We've got enough of that. We're going to...
There you go. Even Homer nods. So also the transcribers, literally.
Oh, goodness.
You also got in this prophetic thing. You've also got, of course, the Elisha feeding. But next, I'd say that was 2. By the way, we're on number 3. Theological things. There is in Mark and in Matthew, the crowd is described as being sheep without a shepherd. So I think I know that's pulling in from out of John, but I think there is this sort of a demonstration that this providence is, again, an intimate knowing act, right? That he anticipates, he understands their needs better than they do, right? So you kind of got that.
Luther in the gospel, his sermon on the gospel for this past Sunday, which would have been Reminiscere on the Canaanite or Syrophoenician woman, he's always harmonizing, it seems. Like he's always bringing in what Luke says, or even for the first Sunday in Lent, he did the same thing, didn't he?
Yeah, because he liked the order in
Luke better. But he brings Mark in to say what she had heard about him. And
that's right.
And so what does she do when she hears? She runs. There are a lot of people who hear but don't run, and that's because they don't feel their need. But maybe that is instruction for us to not be so, well, this is what John, and I need to stick with John. And it seems like the one-year lectionary helps us with that more, because I remember when I was filling pulpits and, working at the seminary, I always had this thought like, well, we're going to get to these other texts in this year, so I don't want to borrow from it. And I wonder if the 3-year lectionary makes that less enticing to harmonize.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either, but
well, anyway,
that was what it did for me.
Yeah, there you go. Well, anyway, that whole providence idea and God's knowledge and compassion in it, right? And then all of the accounts again have this, this like command that you give them something to eat. that I think has a twofold kind of reality. And I want to talk about Andrew and Philip, but there is this kind of challenge in that you give them something to eat, but you can't, right? Mm-hmm. And then also sort of a kind of moral complaint that sort of you weren't even thinking about it. Mm-hmm. You're lacking the compassion and love of neighbor. But then in the kind of final analysis, then the apostles actually being used to distribute these things.
Is there a relationship to that in John 21?
The feed my sheep?
Yeah.
Is that what John 21 is? Yeah, I think exactly it is. That grace is mediated to us through the church and primarily through the office of the ministry, right? Mm-hmm. And that God actually appoints apostles who appoint bishops, pastors, and deacons to do this work, to carry this out. And so I think there's something there too about the ministry's participation in this, despite the deep flaws of the persons that are fulfilling these offices.
So when you're imagining how this happens, he gives thanks and he gives it to the disciples, and they start to distribute at his command to give them something to eat.
Yeah.
Is it multiplying as they hand it out, or is it
multiplying?
I kind of like the idea of like it's the the Elisha tale.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
That it's never spent, and like they keep pulling stuff out, but you never get to the bottom.
Right. It's sort of a miracle of the basket as much as it is of the bread.
Right.
Yeah. But I don't know. It is funny when the water turns to wine, there's no, it happens invisibly, right? And then they don't discover it till they pull it out. That's the other big food miracle. You have that in the when Moses puts his hand into his shirt and it turns leprous, you can't see it, right, until he pulls it out, and then when he puts it back in, I don't know. There is this kind of happening, just outside of sight, and then there being this kind of surprise in a sense. I don't know.
I don't know either. I like the idea that it's happening as they're handing it out, because that makes sense to me of the command. You do it, but it's not really their doing. Right.
Well, yeah. I mean, I always too okay, so you got five loaves. Well, there's 12 of them. So it's already broken up, and I suppose maybe it's a little bit. When it's broken up, it's hard to tell how many loaves there were. So I mean, maybe they could be sort of not realize, that there's more there than they started with. But at what point do they? I mean, there's five. So there's 5,000. What is 5,000 divided by 12? 350 or something a person. So I mean, they're given. They can't carry enough bread for 350 people, one person, right? So they got to be like, this is like you going back to the altar, to fill up the chalice or whatever, right? They got to keep going back to get more. I mean, they can't carry it all at once. Or do they, are they each given half a loaf of bread, and then they go to the first person, break off as much as that guy wants.
Chunk, and it's just never.
It just keeps tearing. It is an interesting, or do they have the 12 baskets from the beginning?
I don't know.
I don't know any of these. I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever tried to figure this out before till we came along. Good thing there's us.
Yeah, right.
To ask such essential questions. I don't know. I think there is something to asking these questions, and that is that the purpose of asking these questions isn't to answer them. It's to engage in awe and wonder at the magnificence and the beauty of this, and to rejoice in it. So I think
it also engages the imagination.
You're right.
Like
because we believe it actually happened.
Right. So how did this happen?
Yeah.
I think you could make the case for either way, that they have to keep going back to Jesus, because that's kind of a nice theological sentiment.
And it looks like distribution of communion that way.
Exactly. Or that it's like the Elijah miracle, that it's never spent, and yet there's leftovers.
Right.
Like they're all given a basket to deliver with this one. I mean, so they've got 5 loaves. Like one loaf they'd have to cut in thirds. Right. To give, and then they put it in this big basket that they're carrying around, and they're just pulling stuff out.
Well, also they give each one as much as he wants. The first guy's going to be like, look, these aren't giant loaves. This is like a one-person serving. So the first guy, they're going to walk up and give him half a loaf. They're already out. Yeah. And they don't even break anything off of it. So I don't know. The whole thing is hilarious to try to. The only time I think we shouldn't engage our imaginations and try to kind of do this kind of work is actually in the apocalyptic stuff. I think we actually go awry when we try to figure out, something with 4 faces and 4 wheels going in 4 directions at the same time. Mm-hmm. I think there's some things that can't actually be visualized, and but that's maybe a topic for another day. All right,
that's interesting. Because they give us a visual.
I know, but then they can't be visualized. Actually, see, we can visualize this because it did happen on Earth. Mm-hmm. So what we're engaging in enacting this imagination is appropriate, but there are things that I think, a few things that actually are conveyed to us by words alone, and this might be related to the first commandment and the prohibition of graven images, that there are things that can only come through words to the mind and cannot actually be envisioned. That's an interesting. Those apocalyptic visions are fascinating in that regard, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the places that, like, the Moody Bible Institute and the dispensationalists and the people that are obsessed with the apocalyptic literature, the Christians that are obsessed with it, it's where they go wrong, because they actually do they go too far in their in visualization, and then it becomes kind of crazy stuff that they're not taking in context of the whole scriptures or the genre that they're dealing with, right?
Yeah. Do you find it strange for Luther to have paragraphs 5 through the end, so to 13, all on the allegories, and never mention the sacrament of the altar?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is shocking that he just. It's crazy that he doesn't go there.
It's allegory.
I know. I mean, I think he's deficient in this. I think I do. So, I don't think that this is a heretical sermon.
No.
But I think it's a kind of blindness, and probably, again, just based upon his argument at Marburg with Zwingli that becomes definitive for him. Yeah, it's hilarious. In fact,
so
what he says,
he avoids it because he doesn't want to give oxygen to the fire of the enthusiasts.
I think so, because it's crazy when everybody that ever talks about this in the history of Christendom up to Luther, sees a Eucharistic application. What he sees, the typology that he sees in the bread, is the Bible, which I'm fine with. But he's right. So he makes all of the application, because man shall live by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God, and he kind of takes that, and then it's like, well, then the word that proceeds from the mouth of God can't be Holy Communion because that's bread, and therefore it can't be bread. I think that's the way, that's in the back of his mind, or, I think that's part of the, so that, the typology is the Bible.
Okay.
12 baskets for the 12 apostles, right? 2 fish for, 2 fish for the Old Testament for some reason. I can't remember. Oh, it was something about love. That was funny. It was something because you can't be alone if your love requires the neighbor, and the Old Testament's primarily about love of neighbor, so you have to have 2 fish.
Yeah, the 5 loaves, like the outward things of man. The 5 senses, the 5 wise and foolish virgins.
Yeah, no, I think it's deficient. I think we could just call it that. He's not he's just a man. He might be our most important teacher, but he's still just a man.
Yeah.
I think he'd be okay with that. I don't think he'd be insulted by that. The last thing I had, so I guess that's the theological stuff. But then, well, maybe this is theological, but this is sort of distinctive to John, and I think is definitely important. That the crowd, of course, wants to come and make him king by force, which he resists, right? Which really does link this miracle to the cross and to the confused messianic expectations of the Jews in the intertestamental period, right? That they're looking for, a political ruler or a bread, or somebody that can meet their material needs. And they just sadly aren't actually interested in the forgiveness of sins or in eternal life, or at least not as much as they are in this kind of, more material, crasser kind of view of things. And then, that...
But they don't, that's because they don't feel their need.
Yeah, right. So that's the sort of, and that's part of the sorrow that the Lord endures, right? I mean, that's exactly what he gives expression to on his way to the cross, how he longed to gather them, right? I mean, that they don't know the things that make for peace. all of that right here. I mean, you're seeing it embodied, that they're not seeking peace. They're seeking by force he's the goose that will lay the golden egg. And I mean, they could kill him and eat him, but they like the eggs, but it has nothing to do with love for the goose right. In fact, I hate that fable because of that. I mean, I get it, but I don't know. It seems to me a kind of crass self-interest. It's the ultimate parable of the capitalists. The goose that lays the golden egg. How do we keep the money flowing in?
Yeah. I mean, that's not what it's meant to be.
What isn't it? What's it meant to be?
Like short-term, fulfilling a short-term need.
Oh, instead of I guess, but okay.
Waiting for what will be provided.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I agree with that.
That's how I always understood that.
I guess because it's golden eggs that are never going to end. It always feels to me like, I mean, it is about delaying gratification.
Yes.
It just seems like such a, maybe it's just the character of the metaphor, golden eggs. Mm-hmm. But
like if they just waited,
I like the grasshopper. I like the grasshopper and the ants better for that story or for that lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well. Yeah. All right. So you got that.
It involves discipline and work.
Yeah.
Is that why? Yeah.
And because it's right. And it's not money. I guess maybe that's what I'm just, I'm so spiritual. I just don't like money. I wish. I spend all day thinking about money, I feel like, with this school. It's, sadly, I'm obsessed with money.
Mm-hmm. How will we provide for all these students with so little? Not even 200 denarii.
I know. No, it's a great lesson. I mean, it's we absolutely must live by faith, and we do believe in providence. That God provides, that He knows what He's doing, and the other thing, of course, always is that we're just living in the lap of luxury,
right?
And we take it for granted, And the things that we think are necessary are so far from necessary.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me that here the mercy of God in this feeding, at least in John's gospel, elicits not thanksgiving from them, but this desire to control.
Yeah.
What's going on with that? And how does that fit into the season that we read this?
Well, I mean, I think so much of Lent is defined by that man shall not live by bread alone. Mm-hmm. And, this is the thing, is that this is the only thing they care about. And as you put it in the beginning, their passions are disordered, and their hunger does not drive them to seek good things from God as He gives them and to trust in Him to provide them, but seeks them instead. Really, they're seeking pleasure here. So I was taught as a child, who was I talking to about this? I can't remember, but so I was taught that gambling is a sin, and it was under the seventh commandment, and it was because you're trying to get something without working for it. So it's theft. Okay, that's what you were taught.
And that's the ancient understanding of usury as well.
Well, who was I talking to? And he was saying it was a little different than that. But anyway, I think this idea anyway of wanting to get something without effort is certainly behind this. Again, the sort of golden goose thing, and so I mean, I think there is always this. I think of the way that the Americans are manipulated through pork belly politics and lobbyists. And, what happens is, Indiana, wants to bring in casinos because then we can get outsiders to pay for our stuff. If we can, casinos will bring in all this money and it'll fix the roads, and we can pay less taxes. We can make gamblers pay for the roads.
Yeah.
Well, it's total foolishness, right? I mean, I mean, we've had all this gambling, state-sponsored gambling in the United States, and our taxes have not gone down. The quality of our schools and roads has decreased, right? It doesn't work. Nobody ever pays for other people's stuff.
You should just tell your leaders in Indiana to just cross the border to Illinois. We've got gambling all over the place, and our roads are horrible, and they're always raising our taxes.
Right. It does. It's a big lie.
It's a big lie.
And but I think this is cast some stones at the Concordia University system on this. Though I think a lot of really good stuff is now happening, and these Lutheran identity kind of focus and helping the university see that's great. So I'm very happy with what's going on with the Concordias we've got left. However, I think that how we got into a lot of the mess was we wanted other people to pay for church worker majors. So the way it was sold to us was we have a teachers college. It trains teachers and men to go to this seminary. And then what we thought was, the thing is there's a bunch of kids that want to be business majors, and instead of letting them go off to the state U, we could take their money. We could charge them a little extra to underwrite the church worker programs. Well, that never happened because those kids and their parents didn't want to pay extra. They were looking for a good deal, and they wanted to get their money's worth. And so we created these programs that never actually brought money to the church work programs. And then, of course, we didn't have the infrastructure to actually support and maintain those programs. And it was a big disaster. I've seen churches do this also with preschools and daycares. And there's the kind of moral difficulties with those things, but also this idea that we can get other people to pay for our stuff. It doesn't work. The people shopping around for daycare are looking to get their money's worth in daycare. They're not looking to make a donation.
Right.
So just at a human level, it doesn't work. But at a moral level, it's also just wrong. That we, So, yeah, I think this Sunday's a good time to talk about some of that stuff maybe and say, hey, look, why does everybody want a free lunch? And we're always trying to get somebody else to pay for it. So,
So how would you bring that up just in that last statement?
Well, yeah, I would say they want to take him by force to make him king. They like not working and sitting around on the grass eating. And we were even in the Garden of Eden. We were meant to work to bring the world into fruition. And there you go. We got to stop trying to get other people to pay for our stuff and be responsible citizens as members of this church and of this country, kind of stuff.
Yeah. I find it fascinating that they're following him out for his teaching, it seems, and how quickly that changed.
Well, it's also for the miracles, though. I mean, he has been performing these miracles. In fact, it says because of the signs which he performed on those who were diseased. It does not say here that it has to do with their teaching, with his teaching. I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't, but it is explicitly here because they saw his signs. So it could have been just, again, we like not being sick. We like not being hungry. Jesus can take care of these material needs and maybe throw out the Romans while he's at it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the kind of, well, here's the thing too that's really beautiful is that, right, it says here, when he had perceived that they were about to come and take him by force, then he departs to the mountain by himself. Well, look, he didn't just perceive that. It wasn't like he was fooled by them up to that point. Like he thought this is all going to be great. I'm going to have the biggest mega church in Palestine with, 5,000 men plus women and children. And they all love me and they're all going to follow me. He knew. He knew all along. But that didn't mean he didn't have compassion on them. And, he's still come for them, and they're still the chickens he wants to gather under his wings. And he also wants to teach.
Maybe you tie this to Luther's statement about gathering them up into the baskets, right? That that you don't take for granted that which is left over. Like they gathered all these up, and they're have already forgotten about how much was left over. They're like, we need to do something else.
Right. Well, the disciples themselves, their hearts were hardened. They didn't understand the multiplication of the loaves. So I think too, that we need to have compassion on the lost, and also even on our own confused and deluded members. Right. I mean, there can be this kind of frustration that can come up with our brothers and sisters in Christ because whatever, they don't come to church every Sunday, or they don't come to Bible class, and or they don't tithe, or they don't, right? I mean, there's all the sorts of realities, and also then the people that we're to be evangelizing as well, to again sort of remember who we are, not better than these people or these disciples, and that Jesus is pretty patient with them.
Yeah, I wonder, you bring up remember who we are. The Old Testament reading is Genesis 3, right?
Oh, I have Exodus 16. We had Genesis 3 a couple weeks ago, but with anyway, I have Exodus 16.
It is Exodus 16,
which is the manna stuff.
Well, I wonder, so you've got Adam and Eve there in paradise. The people of Israel know they're in the wilderness. These people know they're in the wilderness. Do we recognize not just who we are, but where we are?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Just in terms, so often it seems that we forget that we are actually in the wilderness.
Right.
And when you're in the wilderness, you can recognize your need, and that's what they forget at the end, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe they're recognizing their need, but how can we make sure that we're in charge of this?
Yeah.
And it seems like there's something there too, not just about who, but where.
I think you're right. Well, and maybe too, they're kind of thinking we'll just stay here rather than go back where there's food, and work, and kind of just wanting the sort of easy life.
So is there a correlation then to transfiguration? Let's just build 3 tents.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Let's stay here and not go to the cross.
Are the disciples part of the they in verse 15?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, they're not at their best during this, but I don't think that there's malice in them. Their hearts are hardened; they don't understand it. But I think that's the crowd that wants to come and take him by force and make him king. I was going to say there was something else though that reminded me of. Oh, this thing about Philip and Andrew. I liked Luther was interesting in how he allegorized them. So he says that. Right, so Philip is the one that says, 200 denarii won't be enough. We talked about that a little bit. And I thought it was interesting that Luther says, well, he's sort of like, well, the way we would get bread is with money. But then he loses confidence in the money, right? But it wouldn't be enough. And I thought that was an interesting insight. So Luther says, this represents human teachers who would gladly help soul with their teaching, but consciences sense that it does not help, right? And I think I thought that was interesting, that Philip's like, well, money's the way, but even money won't do it. And then Luther to say, this is the way it is with any kind of human doctrines, that we can sort of establish these systems, but there is this inherent recognition that it's futile. Kind of an interesting application. And then with Andrew, he says that Andrew points to the loaves and to the boy, and yet also is like, well, that's also not enough, right? The little bit that we've got. And I think my sense is that Luther thinks that's a superior answer to money, but there still is this kind of problem. And he says, this is teachers who want to make people godly and soothe them with God's laws. And again, the conscience steps in because it cannot have satisfaction or rest simply in the law. And so I thought that was sort of interesting. But then you have, so the other thing with this Luther allegory was, right, so the 5 loaves of bread are the 5 books of Moses, and then the 2 fish are the prophets or something. And they can't help us any, says Luther. But then Jesus takes Moses, right, the 5 books of Moses and the rest of the Old Testament, and he blesses it, and he magnifies it and expands it so that now it becomes this far greater thing. And I thought that was an interesting way of taking it. So Andrew is also sort of giving in to despair, right? There's no hope in this situation. But then Jesus taking the thing and changing it.
Because that's kind of what this kind of goes back to the Laetare theme that we kind of discussed earlier, that, as you take up some of these disciplines, you see how bad you are. Like the first couple of weeks are great, or like maybe the first week. You're like, oh, I can do this. And then you can't. Like you can't keep up. And you're weak and you make poor decisions, all of that sort of thing. And there is this feeling of Philip and Andrew of despair. Like there's nothing that can be done. We're just lost. We're just going to starve.
Right. And the answer is, rejoice ye with Jerusalem. Right. Which is really, so it's not rejoice in the Lord always. I think that's the Gaudete.
That's
Gaudete, whatever it is. Yeah. So this is rejoice ye with Jerusalem, which I think is funny, right? Because they're in the wilderness. And I wondered if some of this it's sort of so first of all, you've got despair, or the temptation to despair, to give up hope, to not trust in God to provide, right? But then also, I wonder if there wasn't something of envy in this, because it doesn't say rejoice in what the Lord is giving you in the wilderness, but rejoice with those people in Jerusalem. Be happy for them, rather than be sad because you're here and you don't have enough while they are feasting there. So, you could sort of think of, Johnny Cash and the Folsom City Blues, right? I bet there's people in that fancy dining car, right? But that I can't be happy for them because it's not me. And there's this incredible kind of love for the other that comes out here. Rejoice ye with Jerusalem, and be glad with her, and all ye that love her, because she has what God gives. And that should be the cause for rejoicing. Now think how different that is than the response of Satan. Right? Satan, the kind of one of the traditional things, like in Milton's Paradise Lost, right? He's mad at the humans who get the stuff that God gives and they don't deserve it while he's suffering. And so that's this idea, this call to joy. Rejoice for joy, all ye that have been sorrowful, that ye may rejoice and be satisfied with the breasts of her consolations.
Excuse me. Well, that's interesting because, so just like on a personal level, when I sort of changed up my nutrition and like cut out all kinds of sugar, what helped me continue to kind of stay on that path is not to say things like, I hate sugar or I don't want any of that. What actually was helpful is to say, that actually looks really good, but I feel really good doing this. In other words, like I'm happy to see other people eat those things. So like, it's not like going around saying, no one should eat sugar, that's horrible. It is giving thanks for what I have and that other people are enjoying those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I know there's a lot of power in a kind of similar way of saying, I don't do that, rather than I can't do that. So if it's like, look, I don't drink alcohol during Lent. It's not a judgment against other people enjoying this, right? If it's saying, I don't do that. It's an act of agency and choice on my part, not something that's been afflicted upon me.
Right.
I think that's similar to what you're talking about. It's not exactly the same, but there is a kind of like, look, I don't eat sugar, and the reason is because I feel better this way, and I'm happy this way, and this is a choice that I've made. It's not a condemnation of other people, but it's also not a burden that's being inflicted upon me. That I'm suffering this terrible cross, and I think that's has a kind of powerful psychological effect.
For sure.
Because so sometimes you get into this stuff, people are like, oh, that's psychology. Look, I don't know. These lines are so thin between theology, philosophy, psychology. It is a kind of psychology that sort of understands how the human brain works, but it's also making words matter and confessing words and saying what is true, according to what God has revealed, and that's theology. Yeah. That words have power,
and that's what logic is.
Right. So
so it's actually using logic.
Thing. Yeah. So all of those. I mean, I think sometimes this sort of stuff gets poo-pooed. That's not theology. You don't have a Bible passage. Well, I sort of do have a Bible passage, right? That for freedom we've been set free. And I'm exercising my freedom here in saying what I don't do. I'm not confessing some sort of, cross that's been placed upon me as though I were a slave, but I'm speaking as a son.
So this is really interesting to me because we have a tendency to just have two categories for something, like. We create this dichotomy, which is a false dichotomy sometimes, where we start labeling things sin or good or bad, when it's not really good or bad. It's just we're choosing not to do some of those things. There are real dichotomies, but so often we blend those into other things. There's some of that happening also kind of in this text, or at least a springboard to discuss those things?
I mean, I see what you mean. Like spiritual disciplines, right? Spiritual disciplines are not about not sinning. We're never supposed to sin.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So spiritual disciplines are about training the flesh and so forth. But here I'm trying to think of where.
I don't know, like in terms of lack, it depends on what you're lacking, whether it's good or bad. I don't know. Maybe I'm not making sense here.
I don't know. I'm trying to think, did they have the freedom to not eat as much as they wanted? Could have they restrained themselves and said, no, or would have that been a neglect and a refusal to feast that would have been inappropriate? It seems to me that it would be irreverent to not eat as much as you want. Mm-hmm. That's not an excuse for gluttony and for stuffing themselves, right? I mean, so I don't think here as much as they want means as much as they can possibly swallow.
Right.
But I do think it would be irreverent to not. It would be to withhold and to not receive all that Christ gives here. Seems to me that would be wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know.
So what direction do you think you're gonna go? I kind of do like that Philip Andrew stuff.
Yeah, that was kind of, I was intrigued by that too, especially this idea of how, right, that they're tempted to despair and their response is inappropriate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Don't know which way I'll go. I also like that. I want to bring in that refreshment language. Mm-hmm. And I would like to use the collect for that, even if we don't pray it that day. They know it well enough. I mean, it's ingrained in them.
Okay. Any final thoughts?
Definitely not.
Excellent. Well, thanks for your time, Dave. We'll pick up next week.
All right. Thank you.